presentation. Good evening, everyone. Case one, this is the first case now. The title is End of Life Decision. My group mates are as follows: si Alisa, Jo, Lian, Mari. I think Jo and Lian are in the room right now. So please feel free to butt in if I say something wrong or you might want to add. This is the case that we were given. Let me just read it for everybody, but you can also read on your own. So Mr. Jose, a 65-year-old man, was rushed to the emergency room of the Philippine General Hospital for loss of consciousness. Upon admission, his blood pressure was at 200 over 110. His heart rate was 120, and his breathing was labored. He was immediately intubated and hooked to a ventilator. On the same day, a CT scan of the head was done, which revealed a stroke. The doctors gave antihypertensives immediately to stabilize the blood pressure and the heart rate. However, he did not regain consciousness. He stayed in the emergency room for 2 more days because no bed was available in the intensive care unit. Mr. Jose worked as a carpenter, and his wife was a laundry woman. They had 5 children. The eldest boy was a tricycle driver, while the 2 younger girls would help the mother with the laundry services. The youngest two were still in school. While at the emergency room, the family had to rent the ventilator for a charity rate of 600 a day. Even if the Philippine General Hospital is a primarily charity hospital, the social services could not provide free medicines and services for all the patients. The family also had to buy some of the supplies. Mr. Jose was eventually admitted to the intensive care unit in a state of coma. The family continued to look for resources to buy the medicines and rental of the basic equipment. After 5 days, the doctors did electroencephalography, EEG. He had some brain activity, which was consistent with coma. He would need continuous ventilatory support and intravenous fluids and medications. He had a nasogastric tube for feeding. The doctors explained to the family that comas can last from several days to several weeks. In more severe cases, a coma may last for over 5 weeks, while some have lasted as long as several years. After this time, some patients gradually come out of the coma, some progress to a vegetative state, and others die. The doctors were aware of the family's circumstances. The family would spend almost 2,000 per day on medicines and equipment since the ICU bed was free. One doctor in the team decided to ask the wife whether she thought they could sustain the expenses given their family income. She borrowed from a relative to tide over the first week's bill. The doctor gave the option to bring home the patient and allow him to die a natural death at home. Given their financial status, supporting Mr. Jose every day with the rental and intravenous fluids and medications is considered an extraordinary means for him. However, hospital policy dictates that one of the family members unplug the respirator and not the team of doctors. So our guide questions, first is to identify the issue. The group identified the following, whether to end the life of Mr. Jose or not, and also the financial capability of family that is driving the decision whether to pull the plug or not. Next guide question is, when may medical therapies, procedures, equipment, and the like be withheld or withdrawn from the patient? So this was lifted actually from the case, second to the last sentence, if I'm not mistaken, that given their financial status, supporting Mr. Jose every day with the rental and intravenous fluids and medications is considered an extraordinary means for him. The 2,000 per week bill and with the work of the wife being a laundry woman will not be able to sustain to keep Mr. Jose in the hospital. So this would be classified as the when. Next question, is it considered euthanasia if the family decides to bring home the husband, knowing that he will surely die? So no, it will not be considered euthanasia. The group decided this is based on the CCC number 2278, no, discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. Here, one does not will to cause death. One's inability to impede it is merely accepted. The decisions should be made by the patient if he is competent and able, or if not, by those legally entitled to act for the patient, whose reasonable will and legitimate interests must always be respected. So the key principle in this statement is that one does not will to cause death. When a person has an underlying terminal disease, or their heart or some other organ cannot work without mechanical assistance, or a therapy being proposed is dangerous or has little chance of success, then not using that machine or that therapy results in the person dying from the disease or organ failure they already have. The omission allows nature to take its course. It does not directly kill the person, even though it may contribute to the person dying earlier than if aggressive treatment had been done. So this is also connected from the previous questions, the question number 2, on when therapies procedures may be withheld. So this is CCC number 2278. And then finally, question number 4. So as a group, decide on an outcome and analyze the morality of the act according to the determinants of morality learned in class. So the group's decision is for the family to bring home Mr. Jose. And these are the 3 determinants. No? So the moral object is whether or not to allow nature to take its course. And the intention, of course, is for the patient to have a less difficult time, and for the family of the patient as well, no, financially. The circumstance we determined is the poverty or the financial situation of the patient and the family. This is my last slide. So my group mates, if you have other comments or additions.
The group mates are there, or some they may want to add anything. None.
Yeah, none for me, Mayors.
Thanks, Jo.
Okay. Can I raise my hand, Rachel?
Yes, Father.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. No, I like it. The analysis, especially of the objective, as I mentioned. I also answered the questions. No, the issue there, I think, is just to put it more precisely, is not to whether to allow the natural death of Mr. Jose. Because the question earlier was just phrased to end the life, no, and that already is the euthanasia. Just for those who may not know, euthanasia is the killing of the a terminally ill patient because of whatever intent, no, which is against the dignity of man. We will go and study that as we study the 5th commandment. So I think you got. I mean, we have the same, practically the same answers. The moral object for me was that whether to allow Mr. Jose to die, no, to die the natural death. It's not killing him. I think that is very important, and this case has several applications to our respective families. You know? This is a very difficult and sensitive issue. I know you may have come across the same. I think with the knowledge that you have, it's good also to express it well. Every time you will talk about it with your with siblings or with cousins, and respect also what they say. Many times also in these cases, although we might be in the correct position, if all your siblings, I would add, as a pastoral consideration, if all your siblings say otherwise, you have to give in because this is not black or white. No? If they decide to continue the treatment and then they are willing to look for, etc., resources, that's not bad either. Okay. But neither is your choice, the decision of the group, obviously wrong. It is my decision as well if I were in their shoes. Okay. How will we go? Do you have questions about the case? Did you? I hope you have followed. Hello.
Yes, Father.
Okay. Okay.
Hi.
Good.
Can
Okay.
I
You have questions regarding that?
yes, can I ask
Before we proceed to the next case,
can
a
I ask
few
a
3 minutes.
question? Hello? Can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Go.
If you change the circumstance, I mean your circumstance there was the financial situation of the family. If you change the
Mm-hmm.
circumstance, meaning that they had the means, would any of the above change? I mean, there are
Yes. Yes.
so that's
Yeah.
the question
I
basically.
think so. That's the thing that we were talking about earlier. No, if they are filthy rich, no, then it's not just
Yeah,
a simple. Yeah. Yeah. So it changes. Yes.
thank you.
It could
So
change.
we
Yeah.
made the
Yeah.
right decision. Because that case, changing the circumstance was exactly my dad's situation.
Oh.
We brought
Yeah.
him home
Yeah.
after he breathed on his own. He was in the ICU for a month or so, and he was able to breathe eventually, and they took him off the ventilator, and they said we could bring him home, but we needed all the contraption. So if we were poor, we wouldn't have been able to afford it, but we bought everything. We brought him home. He was a vegetable basically. He wasn't reacting to anything, and the doctors just said, he's one of these days he's just going to go. We don't know when. So we were
Mm.
just waiting there, and after 3 months, well, it was sepsis. I mean, his entire body
Mm-hmm.
just got infected, and he passed at the emergency room, and that was it. So
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Not only the money, but the
we're at the
pain,
point
the
that,
pain
okay,
that
I don't
caused.
care how much it costs. If that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. But there were priests who were telling us that it's okay, if you just have to let him go. And that's the reason why now my next question would be, if I were in that situation now, I already have DNR. I already
Mm,
have instructions. I have living will. I don't want
mm,
my children to go through what we went through, because it was
mm.
really, really heartbreaking and so painful for us to see my
Yeah.
father like that. And
Very
I,
different.
I mean, the doctors do ask you, you want to intubate him. Of
Yeah.
course, you ask for what are the chances of recovery and everything, but you don't really know. You don't really.
Yeah.
But if it is the patient, the doctors were saying, and even the priest that we asked, if you already have the instructions, then that is what is going to be followed. So is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You said a very important point. The will of the patient is also a very big, important consideration, huh?
Thank you.
In this. Every time you're deciding on such an issue, you think if he's the wealthy man and he would pay for this, then there has to be also that considered that factor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no other questions, we proceed to the next case, I guess. Rachel, what do you think?
Yes. Yes. So no more questions from the audience.
Congratulations. It was very good, that group.
Yes. Thank you, Mears, and to your group mates.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mirs.
Thank you, Father.
Okay. So now we move on to the next case. I think it's Judy who's going to present
Yeah, there are
the
three of
second
us.
case.
There are
Okay.
three of us. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. So this case is an actual case. I'm giving now the context and the scenario that happened 20 years or so ago, reflective of my age. So, so now I can already imagine the controversy that will arise. But can we reserve it now after we hear the 2% my two co-presenters, which is one is Luis and one is
You got muted.
Yeah,
okay.
Judy.
Yeah, there. Okay, I'm back now. I'm now unmuted. Okay, so I request you to present your comments, your questions after you hear my two other co-presenters. One is Luz, a CPA, and Ellen, a lawyer. So now first, I will read the case for your information. An actual case that happened years back. Mr. B, a businessman who has 300 workers in his employ, was faced with a material final tax assessment by the Bureau of Internal Revenue. He exerted all efforts to present his side and show records that he had been paying the correct taxes the past years and even tried to appeal for reconsideration. He acknowledged that the company finances could not afford to pay the tax assessment, which was unreasonably high and unfairly slapped against his company by some tax examiners. As a deadline to settle the supposed tax assessment loomed, he was given an offer: pay a bribe, and the tax case will be closed with only a very minimal tax amount to be paid. So Mr. B certainly did not want to pay the bribe and consulted with his chief finance officer and his key officers, who confirmed that not only did the company have the funds to pay the tax assessment, but the penalties arising from non-payment will lead to bankruptcy. With this dilemma bothering Mr. B, considering the consequence of 300 employees and their families losing their jobs, he prayed hard as he couldn't bear to even announce this tough decision to them. Mr. B sought the advice of a priest friend who, by the way, is already in heaven. And this priest friend calmly told him that it is certainly wrong to pay a bribe, and this must be emphasized to everyone. But by doing so, by paying the bribe, Mr. B will save the lives of 300 families and sustain them in their only source of livelihood, enabling them to live justly and decently. In short, the businessman paid the bribe because this is the reason given. Seeing the greater good that will redound to the benefit of the 300 families affirms that charity and justice outweighed the action of bribery. Okay. Next one. Actually, now we will come to the my two presenters. But as I mentioned the disclaimer earlier, this advice was given many years back. And just to let you know that the threat was real. So we will now present you two versions. One in support of the advice, which was going to be given by the lawyer, attorney Ellen Montenegro, and the second will be given by Mrs. Luz Tolentino, a CPA, dedicated public servant who has retired already. She will now show you the reality and options available in today's world. Okay, so now to refresh, we can just maybe close this one, Rachel, that slide, because I will read from my notes. Uh, well, the guide questions here, we will actually go direct to analyzing what is the moral object, what's the intention behind it, and the circumstances surrounding the case. Because it is a question of, did the end justify the means or vice versa? So to refresh to everyone, the catechism, we did some research. The Catechism of the Catholic Church 1760 says, and I quote, a morally good act requires that the goodness of its object, of its end or the intentions, and of its circumstances together. So that's why that composes a morally good act. The goodness of its object, the end or intentions, and the circumstances. Therefore, may I ask Attorney Ellen Montenegro to present her first version.
Thank you, Judy. Good evening, everyone. If I may just share a slide so it will be easier to follow.
There. Okay.